No decade comes close to the late 60s and early 70s for that singer-songwriter motif. Those troubadours with acoustic guitars and flared jeans and droopy moustaches, laying their hearts bare and, God forbid, sometimes their chests on programmes like the Old Grey Whistle Test here in dear old Blighty. Big names including that remarkable slur of John Martin, Cat Stevens and James Taylor. Less well known at the time, of course, was a young prodigy from Warwickshire, I believe. The very troubled, extremely troubled, in fact, Nick Drake. He was an incredibly talented young man and experimental as well. His music defined by complex and unorthodox tunings, fingerstyle picking patterns to create melodies that served as a remarkable platform for his poetic musings. This, of course, is his final album, a short collection of songs accompanied by Nick Drake on piano and acoustic guitar. The album was recorded in October 71 as a result of 2 late-night sessions, after which the master tapes were just handed over to Ireland with the label Pink Moon written across it. One might question why he wasn't more popular, especially working with the likes of Joe Boyd and people like that. And certainly his music had an intricacy and interest which warranted it being much more successful. I think that the uncomfortable answer is we have to look at his own mental state and deterioration, which was very much reflected in the unique introspective quality of his songs. Joe Boyd muses in his wonderful autobiography, My White Bicycles, about his time working with Nick Drake. There was something uniquely arresting in Nick's composure. The music stayed within itself, not trying to attract the listener's attention, just making itself available. His guitar technique was so clean, it took a while to realise how complex it was. Influences were detectable here and there, but the music was mysteriously original. He goes on to say, at the time of Richard Thompson sitting down and listening to Nick Drake's tapes and listening to them again and again to try and work out what he was doing with the guitar. It was a big break for him working with Joe Boyd, who insisted that Drake's intrinsic sound remained as unpolluted as possible. The result was the first album, I believe the debut album, 5 Leaves Left. There were also some John Peel sessions around this time, and also a support slot with Fairport Convention. But it was on the live circuit that the cracks began to reveal themselves. He was withdrawn, lacked any kind of rapport with the audience, was painfully shy, and there just wasn't that gelling going on that would have meant a lot in terms of his success. In fact, folk singer Michael Chapman said that the folkies did not take to him. They wanted songs with choruses. They completely, of course, missed the point. Pink Moon saw Nick Drake withdraw further into himself, often working late into the night, refusing gigs or any contact with anybody. Very much indicative of his mental decline, it seems. With just him and his producer at that time was John Wood, if I'm not mistaken. But the bleak landscape that was Pink Moon's artwork reveals how troubled Nick Drake was at this juncture. When it came to the actual cover itself, Annie Sullivan, who was the creative director at Island, was asked for a sleeve design. She instantly reached out to photographer Keith Morris, because Nick Drake was being particularly uncommunicative in terms of what he wanted. So she reached out for Keith Morris, who took some fantastic photographs, the last photographs of Drake ever taken. And Drake wore this turtleneck sweater, overcoat, and the pictures provide a very harrowing depiction of his mental state at this time. A man sinking deep within himself. In fact, Keith Morris has gone on to say that the photo session felt like it was an intrusion on private grief. His posture and his facial expressions are very telling here, very harrowing. Morris goes on to say that Nick Drake wouldn't even look at me, let alone do anything. It was just stand there, look over there. He looked incredibly uncomfortable. He goes on to say what a grey, miserable day it was, and it was extremely hard work to get Nick Drake to actually look into the camera. One photograph that does endure was when Annie Sullivan, as I said, at Island Records, brought her dog along, Gus, a golden retriever, which brought Drake out of himself a little bit. And there's some nice photographs of him with the dog. I think one of the pictures actually made its way into Melody Maker that year. But it soon became apparent that they did not want an album, a product, with these photographs on it, as they would be probably considered fairly off-putting. So they commissioned the artist Michael Trevithick to come up with something for the title Pink Moon. It's a very surrealistic feel to it, almost Dali-esque as well, one has to say. Even it's quite Magritte inspired in terms of its use of everyday household objects, especially where they just float over the landscape, giving this suggesting the content has an almost unearthly quality to it. It's interesting that the Who album, Who by Numbers, has been described as a suicide note. Maybe in some respects we could see this album as just that. Of course, the cover shows the very psychedelic image of a pink moon, and as I said, the aforementioned objects is floating around them. And the sliced section of the moon reveals it to be made of cheese. And the added presence of a very sad clown-like face give it an added melancholic atmosphere. It's both bright and jovial, yet at the same time there's something quite unsettling about it. Certainly there are those that point to the fact that the album might be somehow be indicative of the mood in the very early 70s, with the whole peace and love generation came crashing down by 69, and that's pessimism as perhaps reflected in music and art at this time, certainly popular culture and art. The poster of a US rocket slots neatly into place, which is again also reminiscent of the time it was written, and the jumble of objects seem to, and you could argue, somehow resembles the scattered state of Drake's thoughts at this juncture. The abstract and haunting artwork became even more poignant when 2 years later Nick Drake was pronounced dead on November the 25th, 1974. But prior to this, he'd become increasingly withdrawn, refused all social engagement, has moved back to his parents' house in Warwickshire, all perhaps with a view to masking his psychological decline, which culminated in him overdosing on some prescribed antidepressants. This wonderful album is an audiovisual exhibition of a truly talented writer, I think, yet also an interesting probing into a troubled mind. Anyway, we've been watching an episode of Beneath the Covers for Classic Album Review. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please do click like, subscribe, and check that bell to get notified of any future uploads. Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is, as you know by now, hope you're well, staying healthy, but more importantly, keep listening.